Hey guys, welcome to another Age of Empires 4 video. This is my tier list for the 8 factions of Age of Empires 4, dated 2nd of November. Either before or after an expansion we can revisit this, and we're going to be ranking the factions once again by tier. So, the tier system is a bit archaic. It's called Tier S, Tier 1, 2, 3. This is used in many different games, S being the best, 1, 2, and 3 being the next. So let's rank these 8 civilizations, and as we do it, I'll kind of explain why I think they deserve that rank, and in doing so, and listening to my explanations, you'll also hear kind of how I view the factions right now in terms of early, mid, and late game strength. Alright, ready? Let's jump into it. First, I want to split the tier list by water or no water. Now, there's a few maps inside Age of Empires 4 that are almost primarily played on water. There's also maps that have a puddle, such as, for instance, Nagari. There is a puddle where you can use a back puddle for bonus food production, or indeed the center puddle to fight over. There's lots of fish in the lake there. But when I'm speaking about water maps, I'm specifically speaking about maps that are entirely played out on water. For instance, Warring Islands and Archipelago. You cannot reach your opponent except with the transport ship where you mount your units. And in order to get your transport ship and your fishing boats to have safe purchase across the Great Vast Blue, you need warships. This tier list is going to be pretty short. French number 1, aka Tier S, everyone else somewhere else. I haven't really discovered who is the second rank, the third, the fourth yet on water, because first of all, water maps are fairly rare. I've played them maybe 5 to 10 times. Secondly, oftentimes when you meet a player in quick match, they will immediately leave the game. They will just Alt F4 when they see it's Archipelago or Warring Islands, as simply this different dimension of play on the water is not everyone's cup of tea, and indeed many people prefer not to play on it so much. Now, why are the French the best S tier on this map? It's because of the following. If you go to the docks and you check out what ship they have a Hulk. The Hulk comes out at H2. It is strong against arrow ships. Now, if we go to a different faction, for instance the Chinese faction, we go to the dock, what do they get? They get the junk. Well, the name already says enough, doesn't it? This is an arrow ship. So how do you think everyone's arrow ships fares against what is essentially an H3 ship by the Franks, having them in H2 already? Well, not very well at all. So France number 1, and most people when they do tend to play on this map, either they like suffering or they play France. So that concludes the water tier list. Now let's go to the second part of the tier list. So when it comes to land maps or regular maps, here are the 8 factions. I will start at the bottom. I think Abbasid dynasty is very possibly... Delhi Sultanate is very possibly tier 3, aka the lowest. Delhi Sultanate is a special faction in that supposedly they're quite difficult. All of their research is free, but takes 5 times as long to complete as other civilizations. This very mechanic is interesting. You can invest over 1,000 gold and over 300 lumber in order to get several religious buildings called Dome of the Faith. And you can fill them with scholars. You can then reduce your research time. Once you've got 9 scholars in 3 different Dome of the Faiths, or 9 scholars in 9 Dome of the Faith, it doesn't matter. Anyway, once you've got at least 3 Domes of the Faith, this is your age thing. It's called mosque. Yeah, once you've got at least 3 mosques filled with 9 scholars, that's where all of your research times equalize those of other civilizations. But like I said, there's an over 1,000 gold investment in order to reach that point. And early spent gold is an opportunity cost loss for other things. And late spent gold on these scholars means that you haven't been able to benefit with as many researches earlier on in the Dark Age and Feudal Age. So you don't want to go overboard during Dark Age or during Feudal Age getting loads of mosques and loads of scholars, as this is going to cost you a lot of gold that will set you back with your second town center, it will set back your castle age, and so forth. So in essence, you're going to have to get used to getting your research at least 3 times as slow as other factions. In return, you do get them for free, saving gold, wood, and food. And this is a pretty nifty advantage. You can use that bonus resources to make other things. You've freed up things that now you don't need to spend, unlike other factions. But if you look at some of the other factions, they get discounts on villagers, or they get discounts on research, like the French. Discount cost on villagers is from Abbasid dynasty. So there's all kinds of discount and macro advantage. The Chinese can build buildings twice as fast, therefore they are freeing up production for other things those villagers can be gathering. The Holy Roman Empire has a prelate that can buff up to 8 or 9 villagers with a 40% increased gathering rate. Delhi Sultanate has no such thing. They'll get more resources from berry bushes, but it really is a way of not running out of sheep. This is slightly better than sheep gathering speed. It's really a way not to drop to a low amount rather than really having an accelerated amount. So knowing that your researches are going to be slower, even though you've got resources freed up for other things, where do those resources go to? Well, Delhi Sultanate has a few special things going for them. They can, for instance, get elephants at age 3, and they can get improved elephants at age 4. They also have a late game scholar upgrade, which is very interesting if we look at the mask, which is called Zeal. Units healed by scholars gain 50% attack speed for 3 seconds. This is one of the most unique things that Delhi has that I could see could possibly have some pretty special applications that can make them strong in the late game. The problem is, of course, that units that don't have damage on them right now don't benefit from this attack speed. So it is far from having 20 hand cannoneers and putting a few scholars there and then saying, well, all these hand cannoneers are going to be attacking super fast. Nor can you use it on any of the siege weaponry. Now, late game Age of Empires 4 siege weaponry is very powerful, as are hand cannoneers. And while elephants are really cool and potentially powerful, they're more often a tank than a raw DPS damage dealer. The Tower War Elephant has a set of archers or crossbowmen, has 900 plus health, and it has a melee attack that is decent against frontline. Nothing special with considering how costly a Tower War Elephant is, 1000 resources, 3 food or so. And it has 100 damage against siege buildings with a fairly slow attack. That makes them quite good against buildings. And they are also a very likely target to receive Zeal healing from the scholars. But having their attack speed buffed by 50% is probably not equal to facing an army of siege like bombards that other factions can sometimes field. And when we look at the siege workshop, the Abbasid only gets 4 special siege units with no special upgrades for them. And siege are important in the late game. Anyone that can make bombard, it says, hey, excellent against stubborn targets. The bombard indeed will shred through elephants in the late game. And all that you can do against enemy siege is make your own springles. There are factions that have bonus range on springles. Some even have the Culverin, I believe it's called, that is basically like an improved springald, can take out enemy siege with a greater range. The Delhi has none of such advantages. You get the attack speed bonus, you get the big tanky elephants, and that maybe makes them quite good in Age 3. But when it comes to Age 4, they're not the strongest. Their late game upgrades are nothing that can help them there, really. This is cool, Hisar Academy food based on total number of tech research, you get lots of food, but still, even if your research is good, your economy is good, your army maybe isn't as good as the Delhi, and I think that's why I placed them in the lowest tier. One final cool thing that is unique to the Delhi, increase the fire armor of stone wall towers keeps an outpost by 10. That makes them pretty good against melee sieging your buildings, but still doesn't help them against bombards and the like. And then your keeps can be like town centers. Well, town centers aren't that expensive, so this upgrade doesn't do as much special stuff either. That's pretty much the Delhi. They got a lot of cool things going for them, but to conclude, their blacksmith upgrades and their some of the upgrades in order to, like, if you wanted to hit a Dark Age timing attack, you can't. You don't have any special units. No Feudal Age horsemen, no Feudal Age swordsmen like the man-at-arms. Nothing really in Feudal Age, in Dark Age, sorry. No Dark Age rushes possible by Delhi. Feudal Age rush relies on ram attacks. You, as the Delhi, you can make walls with infantry, but no rams. You would have to get the upgrade at the blacksmith, which is called siege engineering. That's gonna take you 5 minutes instead of 1 minute. And as such, you can't really do a ram rush either. Then truly, I think Delhi is an Age 3 faction. They have to finish with Age 3. That's why the build order that I uploaded on my YouTube about a week ago, the Delhi Sultanate build order, focuses on an Age 3 ram rush. I think when you're playing Delhi, you should play 2 blacksmiths and get numerous blacksmith upgrades out. You should get to Castle Age, because you don't have any special Feudal or Dark Age power, really, except making walls with infantry, and that's pretty much it. And then, Castle Age. That's what it needs to come down to. Get your elephants, get a nice supportive army that is focused on countering your opponents, and then rush with it, and pray for the best. Because when it comes down to Imperial, you're not going to do well against the other factions. That's Delhi. Now let's go to the next. That's tier 3 and my only tier 3 faction for the tier list. Now let's talk about tier 2. I think for tier 2 we can look at right now the Holy Roman Empire, the English, Holy Roman Empire and the English. Both of them are pretty good. I haven't played the English as much, so I could be a little bit off the mark, but I think it's telling that we don't meet many English on the ladder. Though Lucifron, who the ex-Warcraft 3 and SC2 pro player, seems to primarily main the English, he's probably doing pretty good. The English are very good at Age 2. They get the longbowman out there that has a lot of range, but it also makes them a little bit predictable. But predictable is fine when it's that powerful. I think tier 2 is fine. I'm not calling them weak. I'm just saying they don't have any special way to completely dominate the game like some of the other factions. And that's my definition for tier 2. Likewise, the Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire specializes at several barracks units. For instance, they've got the early man-at-arms, normally in Age 3, now in Age 2. The early man-at-arms gets 3/3 armor, 3 against range and 3 against melee. That makes them really sturdy against enemy archers, spearmen, and still totally fine against horsemen. Perhaps not winning out against horsemen like a spearman, but a really sturdy backbone to your army. The upgrade to get bonus movement speed is really nice as well. And then you can upgrade them to have the 4/4 armor at Age 3. Having a bunch of them while still transitioning to Age 3, it can be quite nice. They also get the Landsknecht, a brave unarmored infantry with splash damage. Low health though. And he's quite expensive, 100 gold. I haven't played around too much with them yet, and it's all neat, but I still see the super late game as being defined by a combination of siege and other supportive units. What is not helping Holy Roman Empire right now, that there are some bugs. Apparently, when you get heavy maces in addition to some other upgrades, your man-at-arms will only do +3 damage against heavy targets, not +6. This bug is currently affecting HRE and hopefully will get fixed in the future. A second bug is that the prelate from the, let's see, where can we make it, from the town center, it does auto-inspiring on villagers. It can inspire up to like 8, 9 or 10 villagers at the same time. So you place them near your lumber camp and it's going to inspire all your lumber villagers. This is a really cool early game economy buff, and you can use this the whole game. You can also use them to supervise buildings. Oh no, that's yeah. Can they? No. That's a different unit, I believe. Chat will tell me. But yeah, that's what prelates can do. They can inspire villagers, and that's pretty neat. The bug with them here is that sometimes for no reason, that's the Chinese. Yeah, I confused them for a bit with the Chinese tax collector. So forget about that. You put them next to villagers and they inspire. The problem with them is at some point they can lose their autocast through no fault of your own. You can turn off autocast, but they lose it even though it's on. There is a way to fix it. Click on your prelate and right click on one of your villagers. My chat told me that this fixes that behavior, but you need to notice it. And you can have any number of prelates walking around in different places. Keeping track of them is not easy. They don't have a special hotkey that can cycle through all of them. You have to like click with your mouse and find them and then see if they're working, and if they're not, you put them to work. And this is another little bug that I think keeps Holy Roman Empire from rising to the top. But they're a super cool faction. I am going to be playing them more and showing them off on YouTube, but I think tier 2 is correct. That's the English and Holy Roman Empire. Now let's talk about tier S. I believe tier S right now is Rus for their late game, and probably Mongols, but for the wrong reasons. All right, Rus, why are they tier S right now? It's about both their early game and their late game. So the Rus is a very proactive faction. They use scouts to kill Gaia, which is the neutral wildlife, sheep, wolves, boars, and deer. Every time you kill them, you get a bonus to a bounty. You also gain gold immediately from every kill. You have a total bounty score with thresholds at 100 points, 250 points, and 500 points. And each threshold that you breach gives you bonus gathering rates. They also have an easy infinite way to get gold from their hunting cabins that they can make at age 1. This is really powerful for their late game economy. They get a lot of scouting out because they're incentivized to make multiple scouts. They get map control. They can often even deny enemy town center expansions in faraway locations with all their scouts. So they are proactive. They have a lot of scouting. They get good early game economy boosts, and that would be fine. But they also have really strong and powerful late game. So let's check out what they got. The High Armory decreases the cost of a siege engines in nearby siege workshops by 20%. So you build this H4 military landmark, and then you can build up to, 9 siege workshops around it. You usually won't need that many, but even any number of siege workshops around them are going to producing siege units at a 20% discount. That's huge. Many of the siege units cost 200/200 wood and gold, sometimes even more, 300 for the bombard, for example, and then they get a number of upgrades for it. Ram damage doubled. Well, that isn't too good. This is an H4 upgrade that affects a tier 2 unit, an H2 unit. But they also get setup and teardown speed of trebuchets and mangonels, instant. Makes mangonels being able to micro a lot better against enemy groups of units. Then fine-tuned guns, the reload time of bombards, so that's just straight up a DPS increase of bombards. And then banded arms, increase the range of springholds by 1.5 tiles. So your springholds are going to be able to take down the enemy springholds, and these are some of the primary units that you would use to take down enemy siege units. So you can win the siege battle because of it. And you still end up getting all the regular university upgrades that others can get. All in all, this makes Rus a very powerful faction from the start to the end, and that's why I think they're tier S. Now the Mongols are also tier S, but for all the wrong reasons, and I think many people are hoping that this gets patched soon. All of the Mongol buildings can uproot or pack up, just like the Night Elf faction in Warcraft 3 or Terran in the StarCraft games. There are few buildings that cannot move for those games, but for Mongols, I believe everything can move. Well, I guess except the Uvu, but you can rebuild it somewhere else. So it pretty much still holds. Now here's where it gets tricky. The Uvu can upgrade at Dark Age, and I believe it should be moved to the Feudal Ages, H2. They can take packed buildings, move and unpack 50% faster. Yo, what up, Aussie Drongo? Thanks for the raid. I'm doing a tier list. You guys join me? And this is for YouTube. This is my YouTube voice, so I gotta keep going. Unique to Mongols. Packed buildings. Thank you very much. Packed buildings, move and unpack, and pack 50% faster. Now, have you ever seen the movement speed of a scout, the early game horseman that you start with? This makes town centers faster than the horseman. And it's happening everywhere right now. Cheese. It travels like wildfire, which is still slower than the packing technology travel of the town center. So what people actually do, and maybe you'll see some of those games coming up on my YouTube, they take their town center after making like 10 villagers max. They make 4 and they have the 6 starters. So they pick up their town center and they place it next to yours And then they start firing. They've already secured a gur to do mining at home, like 8 on food, 2 on lumber. They make 1 barracks. They rush you with Dark Age Horsemen, which is another faction bonus that they can do. They can make their stables here and go for the early horsemen. And they rush you with horsemen and the town center. Now, town centers have a lot of armor. You can attack them with villagers, but not before losing all of your villagers. So they try to strangle you from resources, and this makes Mongols really terrifying to deal with. I am still trying to use all my RTS experience to crunch a response, but this attack can happen as early as 1:30 on small maps. At 1:30, you're just being weaned off of... you're actually still doing your early game economy. Like, you've literally built nothing yet, just some resource gathering buildings. You don't have a barracks. There is probably a way to stop this from happening. You can build up to 15 mini wall segments around your town center to block any potential locations for that town center to plant. You could also send your scout immediately to find out where they are, to follow their town center. Now you know it's happening, and then try to make a barracks and a bunch of pikemen, spearmen. And I think that's probably the meta response. There's also a way to blind counter it. As the game starts, immediately make a barracks and start non-stop making spearmen. Here's the issue. If they don't do it and play macro, you lose by default in terms of economic deficits and overinvestment into spearmen. So it's a coin flip then, 50-50. Completely up to you whether you want to ruin against macro game or lose instantly to the cheese. Or maybe the brightest minds of the RTS scenes will get together and come up with a counter to it. But for now, that makes Mongols have a very easy, effective cheese that everyone and their grandmother, maybe your pets, can do as well, and rush your town center with it. That makes them tier S for now. Even if that wasn't a thing, I'm more and more convinced that Mongols can be really quite powerful. Their trader mechanic with their landmark, which is the silver tree, can give them an incredible boom of resources during age 2 and 3. So even if the cheese is fixed, Mongols might still be tier S, and that puts them there together with Rus. And that leaves us with the final factions, Abbasid dynasty and the Chinese. I believe these two deserve a tier 1 position. The Chinese, based on their late game siege weaponries, might have made tier S, and they have really good early game benefits as well, building things twice as fast, but it's really their unique units that bring this together to have a very powerful H4 power spike. The Nest of Bees is their special mangonel variant, and it is fearsome. It does 8x8 damage, which means even against armored targets, it still does 8 damage per salvo. Even if someone has like 7 armor, you still do, or 10 armor, you still do 8 damage because you have so many mini attacks. And then it is extra good, of course, against unarmored targets, and it does the splash damage. Same thing with Grenadiers, splash damage. Fire Lancer, nice harass unit. And they get some siege upgrades for the late game as well. For instance, let's find their unique ones. Reduce the reload time of bombards by 33%, that's even better. And then there's the reusable barrels, reduce the cost of Nests of Peace by 25%, which is really incredible. And then pyrotechnics, increase the range of all gunpowder units by 20%. This upgrade is pretty bananas. Range is key in what could be a late game defense fest war of attrition, and this makes the Chinese just so good in the late game. The Ming Dynasty is also decent. You get the military units gain plus 10% health. And that's pretty much it. Why the Chinese are so good. There's more to them, of course, but that's why I think they're tier 1.
Then there's, of course, the French. French, I think, are also tier 1. French are actually one of the most popular factions on the ladder right now, on the quick match. And I think it's for the following reasons. They're fairly easy to play. They're straightforward. Unlike Delhi Sultanate and the Abbasid dynasty, the French don't need to worry about where to make buildings. Even Holy Roman Empire has an influence thing, which makes them need to build things in a core layout. Abbasid and Delhi need to build in a snake or in a core layout in order to connect their buildings with zones of influence. The French need to consider no such thing. Additionally, the French have 20% discount on a 30% discount on economic technology, which is pretty insane. Then they've got faster villager and scout production per age.
This is just straight up given to them. Resource drop-off buildings are cheaper. They're given a lot of extra economic benefits just straight up without having to think about it, and trade ships return more gold. Well, this is a fairly rare application. Units produced from an archery range or stable within the influence of a keep are 20% faster. Cheaper. And that's actually something I didn't know. That's really good. So you can build barracks around the keep. All in all, so many different nice advantages. And then there's 3 special units. The Royal Knights have a charge and bonus damage after a charge. But the most special thing about them is that they are a 240 cast cavalry that has the power of a tier H3 unit, but it comes out at H2. Everybody and their grandmother are playing Royal Knights right now. Royal Knights, being on horseback, get countered by spearmen. But Royal Knights are faster, therefore it is up to the French to decide whether to take the fight or not. They also have like 190 health. So even if they tend to take a few pokes from spearmen, they can still kind of suicide them sometimes on deep runs into your base, killing numerous villagers. As you know, in any RTS that is like StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2 and Age of Empires, if you manage to kill several villagers, even if you lose a few units, then you are going to go ahead in the game regardless. It takes time for them to counterattack, and you can keep producing units at home, more so than them. They get the chivalry upgrade that allows them to absorb damage without losing any Royal Knights when microed well, and do it again and again. So it gives the French a lot of map control. It gives them a forced response from a defender, always into spearmen, which allows the French to make archers, which counter spearmen. It's a very easy H1, 2, 3 strategy for the French that is effective because of how early they can come out and how strong they are. And Royal Knights are actually really powerful against spearmen even because of the charge. Though I did just learn that spearmen can use a brace defense. If you look at the barracks and the spearmen, they say they're anti-cavalry, and indeed they do triple damage to cavalry. But what many people don't know is that you can use the V hotkey. The V hotkey is a hold position. In Blizzard RTSs, you would press H for hold position. But unlike in Blizz RTS, you can toggle it on and off by hitting the same key. So whereas in Blizz RTS you would press H if you're not sure that it triggered yet, if you do the same in Age of Empires, Age of Empires, that's confusing. Anyway, if you do the same in Age of Empires, you press V twice, it disables again. So make sure that you look at the UI and you see the little yellow activation bar move to the right, and then it's active. When you do that with spearmen, they put out their spear, and they actually, allegedly, and I still have to test this, but I read it on Reddit, so it must be true, they allegedly don't take any damage from the charge. You do one full block of the charge attack. That is very, very nice. And that makes spearmen better. But I haven't tried that yet, so every time I didn't use it, I still found numerous spearmen getting trashed by Royal Knights just because of how powerful they are. And of course, indeed, they are a lot more expensive than spearmen. Now let's talk about the French late game. They've got good late game. They've got cannons, which are unique to the French. They're like bombards, but they're just a little better, I believe. Of course, they're very expensive, but cannons are insane. One of the best units you can have. They basically destroy everything. Then there's the Ribaldequin, which does the splash damage, I guess. Is this like an improved mangonel? 5-barreled gunpowder weapon effective against mass unit. It's like a mangonel, but it doesn't do as well into ranged attacks, apparently, as mangonel. It's more like a machine gun, and it's short range. It's not great. Okay, so it's mostly the cannons that gives them a strong late game, yeah? And let's see, Red Palace is a defensive landmark, which has enlistment incentives, improves the French influence by reducing unit costs by a further 10%. That's insane. That's insane. It's very cheap. And then they get, from the College of Artillery, the Royal Cannon. This is the most powerful siege cannon. Excellent. The Royal Ribaldequin. Just better versions, right? They do 20% bonus damage even. Of course, you can only make them one at a time because it's a military landmark. But in a slow game where you tend to squeeze things out, it's pretty crazy. And did I mention that the French are tier S on the seas? and that some maps have some puddles of water, which may make them be able to make hulks more easily. All in all, the French, tier 1, together with Abbasid dynasty. And now let's talk about Abbasid. About Abbasid dynasty, what I want to say is that camels, they're an interesting unit. They're very expensive, but you should see them as a support unit, not as a massable unit. You can, of course, if you want to, go for 20-30 camel archers. But camel archers are special. While they have the whole kiting while on horseback, camelback kind of thing, they are particularly good against spearmen, and that makes them different than some other ranged cavalry. They do bonus damage to spearmen, and they also reduce the enemy cavalry damage. But they are still classified as a light ranged archer type of unit, even as they are on camelback. That means that something like lancers or spearmen can actually trade efficiently still with camels, especially since the camel speed upgrade comes later on in H3. If you don't have that speed upgrade and you're making H2 camel archers, you're still gonna lose to horsemen and French royal cavalry. They're specifically designed to take down spearmen. And then they get the camel rider, which is specifically there to take down other people's cavalry. They really work best within the purview of that specific counter and not as much of a generalist unit as you might want. But what's cool is they reduce enemy cavalry damage by 20%. For this you don't need 20, you only need 1. So it's perfectly fine to focus on regular units, archers, crossbowmen, horsemen and lancers, including the barracks units, and then just to have 1 camel rider or 1 veteran camel archer. They're like a support unit, an aura unit, just like heroes in Warcraft 3 with an aura. Abbasid are also special in that they can make siege weaponry with their units, rams, and siege towers, and that can be upgraded to even include mangonels, isn't it? I'm trying to remember if that's true again. Is that a blacksmith upgrade? Blacksmith upgrade. They can make trebuchets as well with military, isn't it, guys? Siege works. Mangonel reload time. They get the Culverin, which is a long range. Yeah, this is the upgraded Springald, and having access to the Culverin as one of 2 factions in the game also gives them a really good siege versus siege battle. Chat confirms they can indeed make ram, siege towers, mangonels, and Springalds. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great for the mid game for Abbasid. So you've got the special camel unit, you've got the special Culverin that specializes in siege versus siege. Then you've got infantry that can make mangonels and trebuchets, which says so right here apparently, yeah. And then you can enter golden ages. As you make more buildings, everything gets faster. Resource gather rate, research times, and production speed. All in all, Abbasid is a great, versatile faction, one of my favorites, that deserves their tier 1 spot with that. And in doing so, that was my tier list. I hope you enjoyed it. Things may change, we'll record another one. And I hope you also learned a little bit about the factions if you're quite new to Age of Empires 4. Well, thanks for watching, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and be good to each other.